Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. When you recommend 8 hours sleep a night for strength training, can this be aggregated across the week? Some nights I sleep 4 hours and others 12. I work 12 hours a time on both day and night shifts, so I'm never going to find it straightforward getting 8 hours in. That's going to interfere with your recovery. And what you need to remember is that if you have a job that requires you to do shift work like that, you need to understand it's going to interfere with your health and fitness to some extent. Now, for you, the money might be worth it, your career might be worth it, and that's something that you have to assess on a personal level. But the data that's looked at it over the years and just the impact things like that have on your circadian rhythms, it's accepted that you're going to have higher all-cause mortality. There are just health risks to doing that. And as far as that goes, no, it can't be fully made up for, because it's the amount of roughly uninterrupted sleep you get through the night. In other words, you can't get up and be awake for 15 minutes and not moving around and expose yourself to light and everything else, after 4 hours of sleep, and then go back to sleep and expect to get the exact same benefits you would from 8 hours. Because what happens is that the longer you stay asleep, or relatively uninterrupted sleep, the better the effect gets per hour, right? It's the stronger the effect gets per hour. Now, you could begin probably at a little bit by sleeping 12 hours sometimes to try to make up for it. It will help some. It will help some with mitigating that, but it is not going to be able to completely replace the ability to get a solid 8 hours of sleep, right? It's just not going to be the same. And how much will it affect your results? I can't say. I don't think we have any actual data on it, other than to say, a lot of your anabolic hormones and cortisol and everything can be a little bit out of whack as a result of it. So I don't think anyone can say how much it's going to affect you. It might be an unmeasurable amount. You might see, a significant amount less progress in the gym as a result of it. But what I will say is that you're going to have to get other aspects of your fatigue management really, really on point if you want to make solid gains while doing shift work like that messes with your sleep. All right, next question. Jason, when benching wide or close grip, when you pause, should you sink into the meat or pause with a soft touch? I'm going to say you need to go ahead and sink it. Now, I've had people say, doesn't that cause loss of tension on the muscle? No. In fact, the only way you're going to lose tension on the muscle is if you readjust your grip or something at the bottom on a pause. If you are gripping that bar as hard as you possibly can, and you are, again, getting a nice deep breath using your diaphragm, and you are sinking that bar into your upper belly or into your lower chest, and then you explode back up, you're not losing tension at all. You're going to get a better range of motion, and it is going to let you learn to use a little more leg drive out of the bottom. But that doesn't mean that you're going to use less weight as a result of that, learning to use more leg drive or less pectoral, because it's going to allow you to get stronger and use a heavier weight with the same amount of chest recruitment. But that sinking is going to give you that little bit of extra range of motion to give you a little more chest involvement. And it's going to allow you to bench the most weight possible. And here's what I would say. If you really are trying to break things up, like if you actually wanted to train to lose some tension on the chest, that's where a floor press comes in handy, right? So that you break up the eccentric concentric chain. So a floor press might help you do that. But in all honesty, a lot of people have had that come up with this topic before of, are you losing tension at the bottom by letting it sink? And of course not. Not if you're gripping the bar tight. You're not going to lose tension. So no, absolutely not. So I say sink it, man. Sink that bar. Sink it and then explode back up. And the other benefit of learning to sink it is you don't have to learn how to use leg drive. That's been my experience, that leg drive happens automatically without you having to train yourself to do it if you learn to sink it. It just happens by default. If you're ratcheted up tight enough and everything's dug in tight with your glutes, your feet, everything else, when you sink the bar, the leg drive seems to happen almost by default. It just becomes a natural response. And it's one less thing that you now have to focus on. All right, next question. Good day, Jason. If you have difficulties judging the correct depth in your squat, is it acceptable to do only pause squats? If that helps you to check your depth better, assuming you're not planning on competing in anything, but just lifting for generalized strength, size and strength, thank you. No, you need to learn how to judge your depth. You can learn to do that by several ways. You can do it by filming yourself. You can do so by squatting to a box, which is not the same as a box squat. You can do it by running a band inside the rack that's at parallel, so that when you feel your butt touch the band, you can learn to do it. This is just something that you learn over time. You have to learn how to get there. And what you oftentimes find is that you can find a stance, and if you have big enough hamstrings, because you've trained for size, right, to where you can feel your hamstrings touch. Feel them touch your calves when you reach a certain depth. You can do all these things by feel, but no, I mean, this is something that you need to just learn how to do. Quit ego lifting. People start missing depth in high squatting because they're trying to lift too much weight. All right, work with loads that you are capable of actually moving through the correct range of motion, and this problem magically goes away. The other thing, here's what I would say: if you only care about size and strength, and you need consistency, and you're not going to compete, and you don't necessarily need to learn the back squat, that's where things like box squats again are useful. All right. I mean, you could do straight up box squats for a little while, and that'll teach you to also learn to hit depth. That's also an option. Just throwing that out there as a possibility. Not to say that I would have a novice train the box squat. I would much rather see the novice on a normal back squat. But if a person long-term said they don't care at all about competing in powerlifting and they just need consistency and hypertrophy, I think you could use a box squat. I think you could. I did it. I rebuilt my squat with using the box squat after I got out of bed, after spending 10 months in bed sick and having to come back and learn to squat again. And I struggled with my depth a little bit. And I just box squatted for a while. When I got my box squat back over 400, I started back squatting again, and it transitioned over perfect. That's what I did personally. Because I did have problems with body orientation, and that was also a viable fix. So you could consider that as well. All right, next question. If someone manages to add a lot of weight to the bar for each of the basic movement patterns without being in a calorie surplus, does this mean the person gained muscle mass without adding fat to their physique? Yeah. You can't fully separate size and strength. Now, the difference might be, let's assume you were already a lifter and you had learned several basic movement patterns, and then you switch exercises and then you gain strength over the next few weeks on the new movements. And at the same body weight, no, that's not necessarily guaranteed that you gain significant muscle. But are we talking, if you're talking about over a period of time, in other words, let's say you weigh 175 and you increase for your work sets, your squat and deadlift by 120 pounds and your bench press by 80 or 90 pounds over the course of months at the same body weight, I can guarantee you've recompositioned. I guarantee you've recompositioned. But what people need to remember is that small amounts of muscle mass actually translate to very large increases on the bar, right? They translate to very large increases on the bar. So your 10 pounds of muscle in some cases is literally 100 plus pounds to all your basic lifts. So keep that in mind, particularly for the more novice lifter. Again, a few pounds of muscle is an enormous change in strength usually when distributed through your whole body. So something to factor in with that question, which means, you only lost a couple of pounds of body fat to compensate for that couple pounds of muscle you gained. Right, so something to think about also. But yeah, absolutely. If you've gained significant amounts of strength on multiple big movements without gaining weight, you have probably recompositioned to some extent. Totally reasonable to assume that. Is it going to be enough of a difference that your body fat percentage went down 3 or 4%? Maybe not. It might only be 1% or 2%. But you've definitely recompositioned at that point. All right, next question and last question of the week. Hey Jason, what are your thoughts, recommendations on novice lifters doing barbell complexes and GPP on their off days? I think that's a good idea. If they want to do that on my newer novice program, the 2.0, I think that's actually a really good idea. I would recommend things like light cardio. I would recommend things like GPP. Maybe even if a person is strong enough to do some chin-ups, if they want to do a few chin-ups on the off days, as long as they aren't taking them to failure. They want to do extra face pulls, abs, lower back, things like that. Do a little bit of barbell complexes, some sled drags, as long as you're not doing them to exhaustion. That actually is a fantastic idea on your non-lifting days on that program. The problem I had, though, is that the original novice program I wrote is so intensive and so much workload and so aggressive that people can't get away with. The majority of people couldn't do other stuff on the off days. So that was a problem. I think with the newer program that I have for novices, I think you can do that. And I would even recommend it. Find other forms of physical activity you can do, active recovery, GPP, things like that. So I've actually had people ask things like, oh, could I replace the rows with chin-ups? It's like, no, absolutely not. But if you're strong enough to do chin-ups, if you want to do a few chin-ups on your off days with just your body weight, totally reasonable. Totally reasonable. And the same thing with barbell complexes, sled drag, stuff like that. Totally reasonable to do that on your off days for active recovery and just general conditioning. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.